Hello. Um, I'm Val Stanley. I am one of the curators here at the Marine and Geology Repository at Oregon State University. I've been here since October of 2017 already, which is amazing. And so this is a picture of inside of our cold storage. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the facility and what we do. But yeah, just a quick, this is the fridge. This is where we work. This is where we keep most of our collections. We have some ambient storage as well. But what you can't see in this image is everything behind the photo, which is a lot of empty racks, which makes curators happy since we have space for growth. What is a repository? I just had this little slide in here from talking to our student workers one time about what we do here, just to sort of go over it. And as a geologist, we love ternary diagrams. So yeah, on one end member, we've got the libraries. On the other, we've got museums, and the other is warehouses. And then also servers. So we are somewhere in the middle of all of that. Lots of organized things, lots of related data products, but you can't take things out and take them home with you. Yeah, so we are a facility that has been at Oregon State kind of officially since the 70s. Started in a small, modest refrigerator for a restaurant in town, so the story goes, and has grown and grown from there into the facility that we have now in January of 2020. And we now have an actual legit logo sort of thing. Very exciting. We did some work and polled some visitors to come up with the final design. So we're very excited to talk about it and put it all over everything. And then who are we? So I am just one of several people who make this all work. So our director, Joe Stoner, my other co-curator, Care Fritz, and we're very excited to welcome our first instrumentation lab specialist in a little later this fall. We also have an awful lot of student workers who are an amazing team that help us get a lot of the usual operational stuff together. And our software engineer who has been working with us for a number of years on the back-end data side of things. Yeah, and so why do we do what we do? I just like this quote a lot, and it kind of makes me inspired to do the job that I do. But yeah, the samples that people collect are important and turns out really great for future science. You never know what they can be used for again. And so that's sort of the concept and why the National Science Foundation funds us to take on new collections every year and make our legacy collections more visible for the scientific community. Our collections, so here's a map. Each of these dots represents a thing that we have, whether it is a sediment core or a rock core or a rock from the bottom of the ocean. And so altogether, this is about 50 kilometers of mud that we've got in the fridge right now. A lot of it has been here since the 70s with a kind of focus of the Pacific Ocean basin. And then in 2018, we took on a gigantic collection from the Southern Ocean that used to be housed at Florida State. And we've acquired some funding to take on a couple other legacy orphan collections, including some Arctic cores that were in Ohio State with a PI who could no longer afford to take care of them and was moving on and they needed a new home. And I know Alex is on the call and she's very familiar with the buckets of dredge rocks that we took on a couple years ago too. Yeah, so here a bird's eye view of our facility currently. So we have some dry storage and then I'm realizing, how do I do a pointer on this thing? Maybe not. We also have a bunch of laboratories, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. I guess it's also important to say our storage has 20-foot ceilings, which is really awesome to have that vertical ability. We have forklift and we also have a stock picker for going up high, which really helps us maximize how much stuff we can keep. Then we have the main visitor lab where folks work on their cores and do description and we print barcodes for everything. We have a classroom upstairs, which is really great for when we're hosting big groups and workshops, and a small conference room, which is where I am right now. Yeah, let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, and then our track lab instrumentation. So this is where we're hoping our new hire can really help us make these instruments sing. So we have a whole lot of instruments made specifically for collecting data on core samples, which is pretty amazing. So we have several tracks that collect images and various physical properties, as well as some geochemical profiles downhole. But a lot of these need a lot of coaxing and maintenance to make them really do the best they can. We have kind of a standard workflow that we kind of work things through when we get new collections and figure out how to slot old collections in order to fully curate them. So you don't have to necessarily see every single one of these bubbles. We'll walk through them a little bit here. Oh yeah, just a little bit more about, we're trying to preserve and generate access to these samples, both physically and digitally. This is from another presentation, but yeah, we want to preserve everything. So in order for the rocks are pretty good at any condition, but for the cores, we keep them in a fridge, which is kind of the conditions from which they came, in order to keep them from getting moldy and drying out. And then we try to make them accessible for people, not only for their current practices, but then and their investigations, but that also on our website for the scientific community to use them for other things. Initially, the first thing we do once cores come in, they come usually in about 5-foot lengths in pipes, and we cut them in half. And this is important, so then you can get at the mud. A lot of this science is destructive, so you need the mud in order to do your analyses. But then also for, it's basically generating 2 copies. You have both the archive half and then the working half, one for sampling and one for non-destructive analyses for as long as possible. Description, getting everything kind of visually characterized. So then we have that. It's kind of the first thing anyone ever asks us when they're interested in a core that they've never heard of before is, well, what is it? So having that captured is very important. Here's just an example of a very nice core description, and then also a very old typewriter-y one from the 60s. Imaging and logging. So running those sections through the track lab to get a lot of additional information like density, resistivity, P-wave velocities, just to kind of see what the changes downhole are, as well as imaging them right away so that we have that captured. And that's eventually really great for putting up on our website. I think that really helps people to see if a core is suitable for what they want to work on. We wrap them up, so they live in plastic film, basically from the food service industry, trying to minimize desiccation and oxidation of the samples. And then those live inside of tubes, which are then taped shut and barcoded in our storage system. Each of these labels is barcoded with our unique internal identifier, which is on the left, the smaller QR code, and then on the right is kind of some of the unchanging metadata like lat, long, and depth, just to have that really handy and to confirm that you're looking at the right thing. And then we have a system for naming each one of these spaces in what we call cages. And so the tubes live in the cages, and then each sample is assigned a storage location. And that's how, when we get requests, we can go and pull it from our fridge. Eventually, everything gets served after the 2-year NSF moratorium on our website. So now we have these really great landing pages that show basic metadata and core images. It's a work in progress. There's some other things we'd like to add there eventually, like CT scans. And so everything that we're working on, Kara and I, is mostly in spreadsheets, but a very structured, highly structured set of spreadsheets, and all of these things tied together neatly with kind of the back end that Rupert has built for us. And this is sort of just a schematic of where we're going with that, since we've been building out mostly our storage locations map function of that, and also tying our metadata sheets and files directly to our website, so that that's not a static, let's go put this on our website. It just automatically happens, which is amazing. But we're hoping on building out the sample request capability and IGSN assignment soon. Yeah, so our website, it's a great place for people to learn more about the collections. We have both a web map and also kind of a queryable side of things where people can browse by the name of a cruise or a core if they've read about it in a publication. And just kind of to give you a sense of, I know I said 50K of mud, but how things are added to the collections. In our track lab, this is just an example of over the years how much data we've been collecting. So not only are we curating the cores, but we're also making sure to archive all of this adequately as well. Every year we distribute, I have 8,000 here, but we're well over 10,000, if not 20,000 this year already. So things are definitely getting busier here. And here's just an image of one of our research crews that was here. They were doing some investigations on the Thwaites Glacier down in Antarctica, which has been a really cool project and a great group to work with. And yeah, so samples, here's just an example of how many requests we send out in our various collections. So fewer on the Antarctic side, but more on the data side, I think, just because it's really difficult to collect new samples there every year. So there's a lot more of a focus on the legacy collections on that side. Whereas we're definitely seeing a lot of core coming in the door from other places as well right now. And sampling parties, so people coming to work on old cores, new projects using old cores. So this was important, and we were really proud to kind of put together this for our report this year about how many sampling parties we've organized and supported in the past 2 years. And then just a couple examples, because I'm mostly just talking to you about organizing tubes right now, but some cool science. We are home to the SALSA cores, which are they were collected in the end of 2017, early 2018, looking at subglacial lake sediments, which is really amazing. They got about 2 meters of mud, 10 centimeters of which are actual lake sediment from underneath an ice shelf, which is incredible. And so there's been a lot of cool science here, including on the CT scans that we collected over in partnership with the veterinary medicine school hospital here at OSU. And then some examples of legacy cores. So here's something that was collected on the El Tanin in 1971. Here's some very organized log information about the core. And then here we had this paper that came out in 2022 looking for supernova evidence in the cores. I think the general story was no, they didn't find any, but it was still just a really awesome way to think about using these cores in a different way. We collected XRF data on them, just generating new information for these old cores before those technologies existed. A common question is, so then how do I find what I'm looking for? So we have our collections posted on our website, but then they are also shown and housed on the Index to Marine and Lacustrine Geological Samples, which I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with. I think Clint's here. Hi, Clint. Clint does a wonderful job keeping that organized for us. And so here's just an example of the plethora of samples that exist. This is off of Southern California, and each color is a different place where samples are housed. And that's also just a great way to find out what samples are out there, regardless of where they live. So people don't have to know where's the core. Oh, it's at OSU. They can look here and say, oh, I need to go to OSU, or I need to go to Scripps, and then I can do my sampling. When to reach out. We love it when people talk to us as they're getting their projects planned, so that we can kind of help them with budgeting and thinking about what sorts of things they could do to kind of optimize their science using our facility and what we need so that we can get those properly curated when they're out collecting them. We like when folks are making a sample request, it's good to reach out and kind of ask the curators if something will work pretty well. Sometimes it's just good to check in first before submitting it, and definitely before scheduling a visit, so that we can make sure that we've got all the resources available to get everything done. But really just anytime, if anyone ever has a question about the repository, I'm pretty sure any curator here would say the same thing. It's just always say hi. We're not Amazon yet. We're not that organized in practical ways, but we're trying to be. So it's always good to just say hi and we can help. I think that's everything I had to kind of walk you through what we're doing here. And I'm happy to answer any questions, talk about anything.
Thanks so much, Val. Does anyone have any questions? I guess I have one to start. Can you talk a little bit about you talked about increasing basically demand for the collections and usage. Are you seeing any trends in like domestic versus international users, and like return users versus new users, just
That
even
isn't,
anecdotally? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And that's not something we do track, international requests. And I would say kind of about the same. And it just sort of depends on where collaborators are on current projects. We do see some requests internationally from folks who I think find our collections on the IMLGS, because I don't know how else they would find us, kind of from out of nowhere. No one knows them, which is kind of great, to have these new users. And then in terms of repeat folks, it's a fair bit, but I'd say like a quarter of the requests might be someone who's requested before, at least. Because it's usually follow up on a project. They take
Yeah.
their samples here and then have some follow up questions, and then they need to fill in some gaps.
Other questions? You can also drop them in the chat too.
I have a question, Val.
Oh, hey, yeah, fire away.
Hey, this is Clint. Sorry, turn my camera off.
Maybe it's just dark there.
Yeah, no, I turned my camera on. I was like, why is it not coming on? I had that little cover on top of my camera. You showed a slide and it had a core log graph in it, and which reminded me of something that I made a note of. I don't even know how long ago now, but it was originally someone from the USGS reached out and want to know if NOAA was interested and if NCI was interested in like doing something like standardizing graphs and if I would have thought I was going to ask this, I would prepare a little bit better, but I don't recall exactly, but the idea was kind of do it automated.
Oh man.
To speed information and speed out the graph. And so like I'm biased with, with working with you all with the IMLGS, the curator community, and and that's all about kind of standardizing things to get it all to fit into the database. And my question was, would some of you all, I know there's several folks related on this call related to the IMLGS, would you think folks would be interested in exploring that kind of standardizing graphs, visual graphs, that something like the IMLGS and other kind of data centers? Because I know like for thinking like the end users, a lot of people like quick visuals, especially those who aren't really like marine geologists by background. Maybe they're more into like benthic ecology or whatever, but they work with geology related data. And a lot of folks just want a quick visual and then they move on, or it brings them in. Anyways, that's kind of a long way of asking. Do you think there's any interest in a group like this group and others wanting to maybe explore that standardizing? And I don't know how I don't know how it would work, but
I think it would be very challenging, but very cool if it would work. I just, are you thinking specific to descriptions? Or are you thinking like track data? Like, what do you?
I guess starting off with like this like a core log, descriptive information data like grain size and so forth, like kind of like the image you showed earlier, the graph you showed earlier. But I guess other things like MSCL logger, you're also that kind of spits out visuals already. I think more like just sedimentary physical data.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Gosh. Yeah, it would be interesting to go through that exercise, because there's so many different vocabularies that would have to get put together. Yeah, but I mean, I do feel like there's a lot of folks who would like to see it, you know, as standardized as it could be. It's just a matter of kind of thinking of all the use cases that it would need to cover for people to feel like their data would fit to it. And kind of how that would get delivered to you guys would also be an interesting exercise.
Yeah, I mean, thinking even if you're starting off with basic stuff like clay, silt, sand, and just color coding it, and then you know, spatially kind of making silt a little thicker than clay and so forth, sand a little thicker than silt, and yeah, and just running like, you know, definitely not a lot of IMLGS, definitely not most cores have, but some cores have downhole information, and you could run that through a public software that I'm not aware exists, and then spit out some simple graph. Anyways.
Yeah, I know Rupert is working on a little project called the Core Data Repository that eventually would create these sort of visuals and wheels for the track data. So I think that there's something to work on there, or at least there's some work moving in that direction. But I think for descriptions, man, that would be a whole working group, and that would just be really interesting. I know the folks at Minnesota, they've done a lot of work kind of refining vocabularies for SciCat, which is the tool they used in their lab. The tricky thing, I think, is getting users on board, because it's just really hard to get folks standardized with that since it's not really taught that way. And I mean, right now, we'll take anything people write on a clipboard. But if anyone else here has thoughts on that, I would love to hear what you think.
Oh yeah. Hey Val, it's Alex.
I was like, Alex, I was going to ask you to unmute and answer my question. So thank you.
Yeah, you know, descriptions are a tricky thing for us. I mean, most people, when they collect cores, they're going to describe them, but it's kind of an internal thing, and I generally don't get the description. So, you know, we'll have people come in and they train for hours on these descriptions, but then they go to their labs and they don't come to me. And so yeah, and I guess for me, I'm just gonna have to start policing that more. And generally what happens is, you know, I'm a bit hands off unless I need to help people with splitting or processing their cores, because generally those would be material that's still under moratorium. So I'm not gonna be really worrying about getting all of that data until, you know, 2 years or maybe 5 years time, depending on my backlog, if I'm honest. So yeah, but it would be interesting. Yeah, I mean, because I feel like for us anyway, each group kind of has their own terminology, but you know, that being said, as our collection is bringing in more diversity of types of material, so when you brought up the vocabulary, right, it's like you could possibly standardize for maybe like deep marine cores, but then when you have to deal with something that's like more near shore and then lake cores and such, I mean, I you know, yeah, I think it would be interesting to be able to, I think it's really would be just standardizing that vocabulary. And I don't get a sense that there's any like talk between groups, like even just at scripts. And I feel like people just call things what they call them based on their preference.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like it's a win if I can scoop. I just kind of, you know, do a walkthrough on the last day and grab everybody's descriptions and be like, I'm scanning these. Like that's a win. So I hear you on that. And yeah, like the vocabularies, I know the one Minnesota used was originally developed for glacial sediments. And so they had a heck of a time making that applicable for lake sediments in a way that was satisfactory to their users so that they would buy in and do it. and also to make it a program that people don't mind using. I think that's also one of the things, is like, not only is it going to be getting it the way we want it, but getting it to be a tool that people are like happy to use. We talk a lot about core description. I'm sure you do too, Alex. We talk a lot about it.
Yeah, and then compatibility too. Like with any of these programs, I find there's always issues with like Mac versus PC users. And then also like, you know, I also find with students, sometimes they struggle like I don't know if this happens at other places, but when I was a grad student, my, you know, like we were always given a computer and like the computers were up to date. But I'm noticing nowadays a lot of students have really outdated computers, and that's not always provided. So then, yeah, sometimes mandating something that I wouldn't be able to say support them with like an in-house dedicated computer so that they could use it. So yeah, there's a couple of hurdles that we've been trying to, you know, not make anything, you know, a barrier to then adopting a system as well. So that's probably a little bit more on the periphery since most people have a computer, but I've been finding more and more that it's not always, it's not always possible. Like for instance, we have like a handheld XRF, and it's supposed to, you know, you're supposed to be able to plug it into a computer to either run it or get your data, you know, and so, yeah, there's a lot of compatibility issues that we've been running into with some of our instruments as well. So just if anything's developing, mindful of access to it. So
Yeah, we have a handheld too on one of our tracks, and I'm like afraid to put it in portable mode because I'm not sure I could get the data off of it.
yeah, we've been able to just we have a Bruker, and a Bruker handheld, like a PXRF, and we can just stick a drive into the actual handheld, and then it just juts all the data out. So it's going to be your data and then everybody else's data, whoever used the XRF. And luckily on our end, that spreadsheet isn't super large. But yeah, we've been able to actually just go right into the machine with a stick drive, and that seems to work. So you could try that, because then if it crashes, a little stick drive, it's better than a hard drive.
Yeah. Do you know what year it is, by any chance?
That's a great question. I know it's not fully under warranty. This is one of those things where we had a professor leave, and she bought it with her startup funds. I mean, people may be familiar with Jane Willingbring. I think she's at Harvard. Anyway, so now it's like the departments. So, and I'm technically the one who's like responsible for it, but other groups want to use it. So again, it's one of those things where, like who's really in charge of it. But I think it's got to be at least 8 years old. So the other issue there is it's almost better if you have an older operating system. So I don't think that the hardware is talking to updated Windows software. And then you obviously can't stick it into a Mac. It needs to be a PC. So, and that's, you know, for me, it's like me and my boss, like we always use Macs, and then like obviously anything for like our Avitech XRF, that's a PC. So yeah, we always kind of have that cross back and forth between PC and Mac. So yeah. But I did have another question. So I've been kind of struggling. So, you know, you guys have like super impressive numbers on your, you know, your statistics in terms of sampling and data, and ours vary year to year. Like sometimes we'll have kind of equal both physical samples versus the data products that we give out. And then other years it's like completely lopsided. And a lot of that's based on, you know, what happened that year, what cruises went. But the thing, you know, on my back end, I have a really clunky manual way of tallying those statistics. And I just recently like kind of, and I'm still in the process of doing it, but like post 2022, I was like, I need to make this more streamlined. And I was curious, as being an NSF funded repository, do all of you have a standardized way of reporting, or like does NSF ask for, I want numbers for these different types of sampling events or data products? And if so, is that a system that's that you built, or is it shareable, or just any insights on that side of it?
I agree that gathering statistics for annual reporting is a bummer. Basically, we all use the same Excel template. I think one of the program managers like a decade ago came up with it, and just for better or for worse, just for the sake of standardizing, we all just use the same spreadsheet since then. And that makes it easy to just like pull the numbers the same way every time. I do feel like it's something that at some point should be easy enough to be like enter start date, enter stop date, push button, give me my report. At some point, it just seems automatable eventually. But for now, it's kind of a like hunting and gathering operation. We've started doing a better job of tracking all of our analytical requests in the past couple of years, just to standardize that for all of the reasons, including billing and reporting and tracking projects that take a long time. But that's also, it's an Excel spreadsheet, but just making that match all of the instrument logs that we use so that it all goes into the same place a little bit less painfully. So it's definitely a work in progress. It's not the best. It could be better. Yeah.
And are you allowed to share that NSF spreadsheet that they have you guys use? I was just curious as to, you know, I base it, I think mine is fairly comparable, but I don't know. I don't know if that's something that's proprietary or not.
I don't see why it would be a problem. I feel like it's probably on the internet somewhere, like in someone's report anyway. So I could send you the template.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's because that's
Yeah.
on my to-do list, is getting my stats from the last year and a half, all up to snuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting, yeah, because we also have logs for the XRF and our other machines. We honestly, we do it for images, we do it for magnetic susceptibility, and now we do it for XRF. And so not only does that help me keep track, the one issue is every now and again, people are generally really, really good with doing these manual Excel logs that are on the XRF's computer, but every now and again, I find our most seasoned people sometimes forget, but luckily now there is a log that's generated by those programs that Avitech developed. So I can go in and I can also see like running time, because I don't know if this happens on your end, and maybe it doesn't with NSF because they do have that standardized sheet that you guys are all using. But every time I think I have every metric tallied, I feel like somebody asks me for whether it's another metric, like, so I don't want to know number of cores, I want to know running hours, or, you know, like, can you tell me just, you know, what percentage of your users are from Southern California versus Northern California versus, like, you know, and then, you know, so I feel like I'm constantly just taking the same numbers and just presenting them in a different way. So I wasn't, so yeah, so.
Yeah, I'll send you that. And I mean, as you'll see, it's not perfect, but just being consistent is a help for sure.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I see Megan's really awesome question in the chat. Biggest challenge facing in my role, physical or digital? Can I say time? Being one person. I just feel like we're getting so busy that, you know, having more people power would really help us do an amazing job with what we're doing. So I would say it's just having time to do the things the way that I want to. Yeah, and helping more on the digital data management side is something that I would like to be able to do. And as far as how has participating in this cluster been helpful? In many ways. It's really nice to talk to people who kind of are thinking about the same thing, and knowing that people are kind of all in the same boats, or kind of occasionally, you know, they have tips and tricks. I'm sure Marcella feels that way too, like similar but different collections and things. And then also just bringing in folks kind of on the more informatics side of curation, I think is really great, so that everybody can talk to each other and kind of know what they're working on, so that everybody can kind of align and work in a similar direction. So like working on the citation instructions, that's been really cool. I know it's just a small you know, planting a seed with our users, that's a real thing that people need to think about, but having an eye towards that, so that I can kind of refer our users there, which I think is really the thing that needs to happen in order for that side of open, fair samples to actually happen, just for that sort of thing to happen. And where this group might take on in the future. Gosh, that's a
I
great
know that's
question.
not really fair. You don't actually have to answer that, but
Yeah.
just, even talking about your biggest challenge being time, what do you think could help that?
Yeah. Yeah. I got to
It's
think
okay. You
about
don't
it.
have to answer
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, it's a really good question. What happens next? I mean, Clint, do you want to take the lead and like workshop a whole lot of description discussion? Like, I mean, I feel like that would help a lot of people. It's just a matter of making sure it doesn't just help, the marine sediment core people.
Other questions for Val? Hopefully we'll be getting some reviews back on the sample citation guidance soon. I think it's sitting, the reviews are back, right, Joan? Yeah.
No,
Or they're with the editor.
yeah, it's an editorial review now.
Yeah. Okay, I think with that, we have some open time if anyone has any updates or topics that they wanted to bring forward. Yeah, Adam.
Hi, I just wanted to mention that there's a group working on a mineralogy extension to Darwin Core, the Darwin Core data standard. That group is being led by Ben Norton and Rachel Walcott. Rachel Walcott's in Scotland. Ben Norton is now working for a private company. They're actually pretty close to having some terms in review for Darwin Core. So if anyone in this group is interested in that discussion and wants to see what they're submitting, let me know. There's supposed to be a sheet that has the more or less finalized definitions ready this week, but they're looking to move pretty quickly. So I just wanted to mention it since this is a group that would be relevant for.
Yeah, I know from the CSAR end, I'd be interested in seeing what they've done. Do you know if they've to what extent they're like interoperable or in concert with MinDat?
Jolyon Ralph is on the
Okay.
working group. I'm also on the working group. I'm not super
Okay.
involved. I came to it pretty late. And it's definitely, so it's very mineral based. It's not like a full geology standard. I think that's sort of where they want to go next. So it's at least somewhat interoperable, or at least those concerns have been raised with that group.
Okay. Yeah, it's really good timing for CSAR because if there's a way that we can, adopt that, we're like actively working on the controlled vocabularies right now. So if there's a way that we can.
All right. Well, I'll send it around to the.
Okay.
I'm sure there's like an email list, or I can send it to you, Natalie, and you can distribute it if there is
Sure.
not something that I can see.
Yeah,
once I have it.
I'll make sure you have the info too. Yeah. Leslie.
Hi. I couldn't find the raise hand button when Joan was speaking. I just want to go back to the paper. It's still in review. You haven't heard anything? I mean, it's been a long time.
I know it has. Yeah, it's just taking a long time. It was a long paper, so maybe that's why part of it. But it's at least it's an editorial review. I just was notified like a week or two ago. So I think the reviewers have turned it in and it's in the hands of the
okay. All right, no, it's just sort of almost had the gestation period of an elephant. It's just taking forever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess related to that, we've been in review for Core Trust Seal for 2 years. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience or not, but it's been 2 years that are.
I have not had that experience, but I've certainly heard of others that have. They're really strapped. They struggle to find enough reviewers.
Yeah.
And in fact, I knew someone that I think would not go through to the WDS list because they were unwilling to take on the burden of doing reviews for other groups.
Yeah, but hopefully we'll get that soon, and I'll definitely send an update to everyone. I did just want to mention that one of the next things that we wanted to work on together was having a companion guide to the author guidelines for publishing and citing sample-based research, more focused on like what data repositories can do. And we haven't like formally got that going, but we did want to have a presentation on that at AGU. So we need to get that going. And I think we're gonna try to set up a separate meeting. So if anyone's interested in like getting that conversation going, let Natalie or I know, and we could add you to the meeting if you're interested. Otherwise, we will definitely like talk about it in a bit in future meetings. But we do want to have these presentations, so that is the focus of some of our upcoming meetings. So we may need some additional like working meetings for something like that.
And I would just say that our webinar schedule for the fall is built out, but I'll be putting out a call and contacting people directly as well to start to build out the 2025 schedule as well. We have a lot of repositories that we're eager to showcase. And we're going to be working on getting a cluster YouTube channel within ESIP started. We haven't had a formal one before. And so that's something that we're working on. Any other discussion points for today? Okay. October 22nd is our next webinar, same time. And we will have Lindsay Powers speaking from the USGS. Hopefully some good updates about what they're doing with the IGSNs and anything else that she has to share. Thanks so much for tuning in.